Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming back after the great break that we had. My name is Stavros Karamperidis, and as you can see, today I'm going to give a presentation about how we're going to create a green corridor. And I would like to thank the SMI, Tom is sitting somewhere here, and the rest of the team, for giving me the opportunity to deliver a presentation on that topic, because as I said to the organizers, it's not the $1 million question, it's the $1 trillion question, because as you have seen from what we're discussing today, we're discussing for factors which are related with alternative fuels. That's the $1 billion question. And especially if you see what the IMO is talking at the moment, that's a big thing. And of course, we're talking about skills development that is needed to be tackling a lot of issues. That is probably the $1 million question. But of course, I'm not trying to create a hierarchy here of what is more important or not. All the aspects are important. And in order to achieve that, transition into the green economy and the overall sustainability. As you can see from the slides, I'm sitting on the board of the Port of Plymouth, so I'm having hands-on experience. I'm not the typical academic who is sitting behind the books, having no interaction with the industry. And I'm also having the honor to be member of the SMI group in terms of the ports and terminals, and of course being the head of the transport research group. That group has been based in Plymouth. We're having 4 pillars of research. One is about marine policy, so we're trying to influence policy. Maritime economics, maritime security, which we've seen earlier on from the slides that Richard was saying, what is happening to the overall global economy, especially with the Red Sea. And of course, sustainability. And through that spectrum, I'm going to talk to you about the green corridors. And we're doing a lot of work. We're collaborating with IMO and other various organizations, talking about sustainability. But the biggest baby I would like to talk, since we're going to talk about ESG later on, that's the ESG index that we launched a year ago during the London International Shipping Week. And of course, you can go and click on that. That's a baby that is growing the last year or so. A lot of shipping companies are using it in order to map their performance in terms of environment, social, and governance. And it's not only that a lot of shipping companies are using it because it has the magic word, which is called free, which a lot of ship owners, as you can understand, they like a lot. But it's a good quality. And why I'm saying that? Because if you ever have done any work on research on ESG, especially for the shipping and the ports sector, you need to use some of the GRI protocols and the SASB criteria and all that kind of stuff, which if you ever go down to details of what kind of information they need, you will find out that they're bringing information from other sectors that are not relevant, like the petroleum industry, for example, or so forth, so on. So as you will find out, that index is tailor-made for shipping, which is really made for what the tin says. So, before the background information, to give you a bit of background about the green corridors. As you can see from the slides, which I've got from DNV, there are 5 key players in terms of creating a green corridor. And number 1 is the government. We discussed a lot about the regulation that is required in order to create all the movement of the goods. And actually, a green corridor, just the very basic definitions, there are various definitions, there are a lot of discussion about it, is to move a product from point A to point B without any emissions, okay? And includes everything from the movement of the cargo within the port, the vessel itself, the fuel, where is this fuel is being sourced and how the fuel is being produced. Then the second most important player is the cargo owner, because the cargo owner can dictate how the cargo will be moved. And we have a lot of cargo owners that are requesting that kind of service at the moment. We have Nike, we have IKEA, for example, they're looking for that kind of movement of the goods through green corridors. Ship owners are there. Ports, it's going to be and they're going to be a critical point, and I'm going to discuss and elaborate later on. And of course, the fuel suppliers, because if we don't have the fuel suppliers, the fuel will not be delivered to the point it is needed. So that's a schematic representation of how 44 shipping corridors have been developed around the globe. I'm just giving them as an illustration to you so you can see what kind of nodes in the system of logistics we start creating with the term of green corridor. Of course, for those who are following the news, you're more going to say, Stavros, what are you talking about? None of them exist yet. True, because from the 44, 19 are still in initiation phase. Only 4, as you can see, are the right spectrum that are coming close to execution. Okay? And those are very small, short-distance corridors. Okay? But as you can see, the companies and the people come together and they start talking about it. They signed NDOs, they have signed a lot of data exchange ideas, because in order to create a green corridor, we need not only to talk about alternative fuels and decarbonization, but we need also digitalization, implementations of the overall systems, how the systems are going to interact with each other. And not only the port, but the vessel, how the vessel is going to exchange information, how the cargo is going to exchange information. And of course, a couple of years ago, we had a very good excuse that it was difficult to exchange data. Now with Starlink and similar technologies, data cost has dropped a lot, and we can exchange information through various satellites. Talking again about green corridors, there are a lot of, as I said, 44 initiatives, but there are 171 stakeholders so far. And as you can see, most of the leadership come from the industry, but governments is just below that. And of course, we had a discussion earlier on. Tom has provided a very nice diagram about the various energy sources. Methanol is top at the moment. Why? Because it's easy. Is it clean? We're going to discuss about it later on. But it's easy at the moment, and it's very similar to diesel. When we go to methanol and hydrogen, you need to cool it down, minus 80 degrees and all that kind of stuff. And by the way, I'm not an engineer. So maybe if I say something that's not correct, feel free to correct me later on. So the view that we've got, and what I'm presenting you here, is a study that we have done a couple of months ago, and we've been commissioned from the High Commission in Singapore, our High Commission in Singapore, to identify how we can create a green corridor between the UK and Asian region, with Singapore to be in the middle. And we have identified some very interesting facts. But first of all, the view that we've got, it was that technology is here, and we know that from the various reports we've seen, but we try to see it from a green shipping corridor perspective, if it can support trade and investment. And why we took that kind of approach? Because we think that the shipping decarbonization will change the overall flow of trade and the investment. And why is that? Because all that kind of stuff that we're discussing about decarbonization, the IMO, the EEXI, the EDI, and the ETS, they will bring approximately 90 billion on an annual basis. And of course, the IMO could collect up to 127 billion per year as a levy for the carbon emissions. As we discussed earlier on from the graph that Tom has demonstrated, yes, methanol at the moment is more expensive as a fuel, but if all those levies come along, maybe it's not. And that's why we need investment in green ships, sustainable port infrastructure, and of course, creating a bunkering infrastructure that is made for purpose. So the energy transition in shipping, the pricing and the overall charging mechanisms that we're seeing, and we're talking about many billions here, according to the United Nations, and that's a report that's been published 2 weeks ago, is going to cost 0.1% of the global GDP, and I think I'm having it here, yeah. So that's going to be a big impact to the overall economy if we're not going to take the right investment decisions. And the energy transition is going to come along, and it's going to impact everybody in the overall supply chain. So that's why there's going to be an increase in the overall trade and how the trade is going to move around the globe. And the overall greenhouse shipping corridors will provide an opportunity to governments and industry to collaborate together. And we've seen that already. If you go to places like Singapore or in Netherlands, you will see that the government is working with a lot of stakeholders together so they can create that kind of ecosystem that is needed. And the ecosystem is the magic word, so we can bring everybody together. So, as I start mentioning some of the competitors, of course putting them in quotation, what other countries are doing in terms of involving green corridors, how they're developing them. There are several reports out there. I don't know if you're following the news, but of course, UK has a lot, big space in that. And there's a lot of outcomes that are coming from there, from the Silk Alliance that's existing in Singapore to the Maritime Forecast 2050. And there's, of course, a lot of discussion at the moment on how to do that. MPA, for those who are following the news, 2-3 weeks ago, they have managed to sign a collaboration agreement with Microsoft to boost innovation, cybersecurity, but the most important, digitally green transformation for the maritime sector. Why they want to do that? Because they want to create a digital ecosystem that will be able securely and quickly and safely to exchange information so they know the energy efficiency that Richard was talking earlier on of the vessels, which is an important factor, how you can improve it, filter that with weather data, how we can improve the energy efficiency of the vessel, because as we've seen, all the alternative fuels are going to be they will require more space, and space is an issue in terms of OPEX and CAPEX for the sector. We have already the Rotterdam-Singapore green shipping corridor that is happening. And of course, they have managed to sign an NDA, and they're aiming to reduce 20 to 30% of emissions by 2030, which is not far away. It's only 6 years away. So the investment and everything is happening at the moment. So new fuels, they have managed to create new working groups. They've managed to create various standards in terms of ship-to-ship bunkering and all that kind of stuff. And they also, as you can see, they're trying to create some digital tools they could implement. At the moment, they have done a progress report a couple of months ago about what the Rotterdam-Singapore Green Shipping Corridor is looking for. And we have 5 main liner operators, 3 fuel suppliers, 4 alternative working groups, 2 financial partners, 3 industry coalitions, and 8 knowledge exchangers. So as you can see, they start creating the ecosystem, and the ecosystem is live and is working already. They're working on the implementation of the first vessel. It's going to be there by 2027, not far away, 3 years from now. And they're trying to change that kind of implementation, how the ships are calling the various ports. So there is a big chance of the UK to be overlooked over the time and become a feeder port. If that's going to be the case, as you can imagine, it's going to be not good for the UK economy, because it's going to increase the cost and it's going to increase the time needed for the goods to arrive here. So that's why we have to keep an eye on what is happening and to be ahead of the game. How we can do that? That's the main question that is coming out. And that was part of the pre-feasibility study that we have done, myself and my team. We have set 2 objectives: to understand the environmental and economic significance of the UK, Singapore, and Asian region for developing a green shipping corridor, and try to provide collaboration and policy suggestions for the UK and Asian governments, ports, and other stakeholders to develop that kind of green corridor. And as you can see, a couple of photos of me and my team being in Singapore and Malaysia. We visited couple of countries there. So in order to drive the global trade and investment, we have to create a Venn diagram that is looking on low carbon framework that the governments are trying to create so they can boost trade and investment. We also need greater collaboration and cooperation within the value chain. We're discussing about that kind of collaboration, and Tom has presented an amazing graph in the beginning of the session today, with how many stakeholders are there. But also we need to target impactful sustainable finance within the value chain. And that finance exists, especially in London, between London and Singapore, that finance exists, and it's something really important. What we have identified in order to create a green shipping corridor, the main components that we need to tackle is sustainable transport modes, port infrastructure, clean energy sources, smart logistics technology, policy and regulation, sustainable finance, and stakeholder engagement. And that's a key identification. And I'm going to briefly provide some information about each of those bullet points. Sustainable transport modes. As you can see, 5 of the main shipping companies are controlling nearly 65% of the overall container market share. So if those 5 companies that have already been involved with the Singapore-Rotterdam shipping corridor, they take a decision and say, you know what, we found better facilities there. We don't want to use the UK anymore, or we're going to bypass it. That's going to be it's going to have a huge impact. 80% of the new builds are dual fuel, LNG or methanol, and 50% of the new builds have been placed only from the 6 major shipping companies. Cost of the alternative fuels can increase by 50% the overall operational expenditure, which is something very important, and we have to keep an eye. And that's why I place that graph on the left-hand side, which is that's a graph from BP that is providing the overall overview and forecasting of that BP is making in terms of the cost of fuels from today, from 2030 to 2050. And as you can see, it's considering blue ammonia, green ammonia, synthetic methanol, biomethanol, and of course, diesel is the gray line on the bottom. As you can see, the only fuel, according to, if of course we don't consider any kind of mechanisms that the IMO is trying to implement, but only biomethanol by 2050 seems to be one of the fuels can reach the overall sustainability in terms of operational expenditure. Port infrastructure, that's the most critical component. Ports can act as decarbonization hubs, and in order to do that, we need to make investments. They require a huge amount of investment in terms of infrastructure. As you can see, there are various factors over there which I don't have, unfortunately, the time to elaborate, but I'm sure that the slides will be shared with you so you can have a look about how we can achieve that kind of decarbonization of the ports. Port in terms of the readiness between Singapore and the UK, Port of Felixstowe, London Gateway in Southampton, they've done a lot of investments at the moment in terms of how they can upgrade their overall facilities. But the biggest problem that every port around the globe is facing at the moment is how to bring the green electrons into the port. The moment we bring the green electrons in the port, then we can convert them to methanol, to ammonia, to whatever we need. And I think that's where we have a competitive advantage as the UK, because we are the leader, especially in Europe, in terms of creating renewable energy, offshore wind renewable energy. If we can manage to create that kind of infrastructure that comes into the port and convert that kind of green electrons to a competitive advantage so we can create value, then that value can be harnessed and we can implement that into the overall Green Corridors project. And of course, we have to keep an eye that the UK ports are strategic asset for the UK, and that's why we need to integrate it in the overall system. Clean energy sources, as I started in the beginning, that's the $1 billion question. Nobody knows which fuel is going to be. Everybody's talking about a multi-fuel environment at the moment. LNG, a lot of people were talking that it's going to die quite soon. It's going to be a transitional fuel. For those who are following the news, Mars has placed 6.6 billion orders 2 weeks ago in LNG fuels. Okay, methanol and ammonia looks as a long-term solution, and of course there is a lot of trillion of US dollars we need to put as an investment. Talking about alternative fuels, of course, you know, as we discussed earlier on with Tom as well, that not all the fuels are. It's not only positive, the overall operation. While there are some studies that even when you're burning methanol, some CO2 being emitted. MIT has released a month ago that even ammonia can lead to additional deaths of people up to 7,100 people. And of course, Maersk is thinking for a new model of nuclear power. Richard mentioned earlier on why we cannot use new nuclear reactors. That's a very valid question, especially the 4th generation reactors that can potentially provide a lot of energy that is required in a clean way to power the fuels. And that's been some studies that have been conducted. Hopefully we could probably see some outputs there. Clean energy sources, mainly the UK is focusing primarily in the domestic shipping activities, but we need to think about how methanol and ammonia bunkering are going to take place. Procedures is not here yet, and is, as I said, the $1 billion question. Singapore is developing a lot of digital tools to be able to implement all that kind of systems into the network. They're creating the digital ocean systems, and I know that later on we're going to have a great presentation about some of the digital tools that have been developed in the UK. But the UK has the lead in the maritime and business services. So we need to use that kind of leadership position. We have the knowledge, the know-how, the perception that we're having from other countries to go forward. Sustainable finance is the key. It's going to be the lubricant so we can have everything happening. That is going to be the key component that we need in order to be able to do all the investments we need to create the green corridors. And London and Singapore are the two main hubs. Having also the Poseidon Principles here in the UK helps a lot. We have a lot of local contacts that we can leverage. Findings of the study, UK is in a leading position in terms of research and innovation. We have amazing universities around the place. I've seen a lot of my colleagues here sitting, that they're doing an amazing work in green transportation. We need to do the investments in terms of green. We need to upgrade the overall grids. We need to bring the multiplier, the stakeholders together, because that's a main issue that we're facing, and the UK can become a renewable energy hub. We need to approach the overall multi-fuel session, and a couple of suggestions we're coming down to the policymakers is that we need to support the terminals in order to implement the guidelines of the green shipping corridors and the policy to encourage further investment. We need to standardize the framework that needs to be developed. That's something very important. And also try to establish a forum between the government, the private sector, the universities, so we can enhance the research and development in terms of the green shipping corridors. Setting up a green shipping finance hub is going to be something good that's going to help all that to take place. Probably we can utilize also some of the free ports that are existing over there, try to make an easy environment for investment, and also try to create a domestic strategy in terms of harbors and how they can go forward. That's, in a nutshell, the strategic development plan that we're having, and that's my final stage and slide. And what we're proposing is that we need to develop a working committee that is going to bring all the stakeholders that Tom was saying earlier on in the morning, so they can talk about the sustainable transport modes, the port infrastructure, the energy sources, the smart logistics, the policy, the sustainable finance, the stakeholder alignment, and the research and development coming together. Only by breaking the various operational silos that we're having, only by that way we're going to achieve the green shipping corridors. Thank you very much for your attention, and looking forward to the discussion later on.